Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about how you can create your own line plots. And once we actually create our own line plot, we're going to be using what we learned yesterday to understand the information that's on our line plot. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a table or a chart with our information to see what kind of line plot we're even making. So when I take a look over here, the title says heights in inches, and these are the heights of different classmates or students in a single class. So that's going to kind of tell me what kind of information I'm plotting. So just like a book has a title, graphs have a title because it's important to know what we're actually looking at. So I'm going to write my title down here on this long line because remember line plots, they're a little unique with that. And I'm going to write the height, and I'm going to be more specific than they were. I'm going to say heights of, actually I'll say height of students. And I'm also going to make sure I do include inches because I want to make sure that the person reading my graph knows that I'm talking about inches and not centimeters, which are really small, or miles, which is really long, and that wouldn't make sense. So I want to be as clear as possible. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my tally marks. So over here I have tally marks, and that's an easy way when you're kind of asking a question or recording a lot of information at a time to just make a single mark. But it's a lot easier when we have a number. So I'm going to go and write the number next to these so that when I go to graph it later, I know exactly how many X's to put there. So over here, this is one tally mark, so that's 1. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here. That one's easy, 0. And then take a look at this group here. When you have a group of tally marks like that, that's a group of 5. So you normally would have your 4 and then your 5th one goes across. And I like to think of that as more than 4. Close the door because you're closing it off to that group. And that makes it really easy for us to skip count and not have to sit there and count every single tally mark. So I know that this is 5 and then I've got one more. So that's 6, another group of 5, 6, 7, a group of 4, 2, and 1. So now I've recorded my information over here to the side, and I can work my way down here and start making my line plot. Now down here it says height of students in inches, so I want to make sure that I put my inches down here. And I'm going to start at 49 because that's my smallest one, and I'm going to keep going. Even if a number like 51 doesn't have any information, I'm not going to skip it because not having any information is still important for me to see that nobody was that height. So make sure you're not skipping any numbers when you do this. When you start with your smallest, you're going to keep going, even if there's no data or information for that. Now I can start making my X's. Over here I have 1X, so I'm going to make 1X. I've got 4 students at that height, so I'm going to make 4 X's because each X stands for a student. 51 has 0, so I just leave it alone. And then I come over here to 52. I want to make sure that I'm not putting my X's over here if I skipped it. So I already did 51 with 0. Now I'm going to do 52, and that has 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Check. I've got 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Notice how I'm keeping my X's as lined up as I can so that it just makes it easier for me to read my graph later on. 54 has 4. 55 has 2, and 56 has 1. Now that I've created my graph, I can apply what I learned yesterday about understanding a graph and reading the information that it has. So I'm going to come down here to number 5, and it says, which height appears the most often? So I need to make sure that I'm looking at the height. My answer needs to be a height, but I also want to see which one is happening the most often. And it even gives you a little hint. Think about the height that has the most X's because most often means it's going to have the most. It's happening a lot. So I'm looking for my heights. Here are my heights down here. And which one has the most X's? When I look here, this one had 7 and none of the other heights had close to 7. I think 6 was the closest, but that's still not the most. 7 is definitely more than that. And it's also more than 4. So 7 people had a height of 53. Now, I'm not going to write 7 because it's not asking me how many students were that height. It's asking what height is it. So this one is the most often, but the height itself is going to be 53. And I'm going to make sure I put 53 inches because that's the height that appears the most often. It's happening the most. Now this question is very similar. It says which height appears the least often, and least would be the opposite of most. So which one doesn't appear hardly at all? So when I look here, I've got 1x here and 1x here, and that's pretty small. But I see something that's even smaller than 1. When I take a look at this, I see that there's nothing over here for 51. So the height that appears the least often would be 51 inches because 0 is smaller than 1x. So even though these both had a single x, it's still not the least often because 0 is going to be smaller than that. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 7. Number 7 says how many students, so now I'm thinking of students, I'm counting students, are at least 54 inches tall. So I'm looking to see how many students are at least 54 inches tall. When I see at least, that tells me that that's the least it can be. It can't be smaller than that. So I'm going to go to 54. It has to be at least 54. And 54 is 54. That's the least it can be. But I have to keep going up. So I've got 54. I've 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 2 and 1. I want to know how many students are at least this tall. And if I count up all my x's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 students are at least 54 inches tall. That means that they're no smaller or shorter than 54. The last question says how many students, so again, I'm looking at students, are less. So now I'm looking at less than 52 inches. So if I'm looking at less than 52, I'm going to start around 52 and look for smaller things than that. So less than 52. Now 52 isn't less than 52. 52 is 52, so that's not going to work. I need to go smaller than that. So I'm going to go here at 51, and there's actually nothing there. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. And now I need to see how many students are less than 52. All of these are less than 52 inches. So I've got 0 plus 4, and that gives me 4, plus 1 more, and that gives me 5. So 5 students are less than 52 inches tall. So today you're going to practice on your own, creating your own line plot while being given a chart or information just like I was.